Now we're going to conduct a reassembly of our Glock pistol, and we'll start by reinserting the magazine release lever or bar, whatever you want to call it, back into this space. We're going to do this on the side that corresponds to our magazine release position. On Gen 4s it's reversible, but on Gen 3s you'll see that it only goes in one way, and this is the way we need to reinsert it. So we're going to do this right now. You remember that we pried the spring out of this lever, so we can kind of see it protruding. Let me turn on my light. You can see it protruding and blocking the release lever. So what I'm going to need to do, and in this video I use a different tool, not a Glock tool, for this, simply because I'm doing this upside down. Okay, so what I'm going to need to do is pry the spring away a little bit to allow magazine release. There's that spring to slide between the spring and the frame, just like that. I hope you could see that. So now let's see if you're actually focused in on that particular thing. I hope you are. Okay. So now I'm going to start pushing this in, pushing the magazine release in, and we're going to need to move the spring back into its slot. Oops, sorry. So I'm going to start, lost it. I'm going to start moving it into that slot. Takes a little bit of force, and I'm actually not seeing what I'm doing, so there. As soon as you allow it to enter into that little opening on the magazine release lever, that opening right there, it'll just snap in place. We're going to check if our magazine release has tension, and it does. Let's see it this way. I hope I can show you with enough light that it works. Maybe I'll use my little light pen for this. There. See our magazine release working. The spring forces it back, so it's reinserted correctly. I'm going to set the frame aside, and we're going to start working on the trigger housing. Let's see if I can make sure that we're focused in on it. There. So remember I said during disassembly that you can only put the connector bar in on one side. That's the side that has this cutout for the connector bar. We're going to take our connector bar and use its leg, bottom of the L, if you will. See, it looks like an L. We're going to use that and put it into this little slot and just push it in, even with our finger. So the bottom should sit flush. The top should not. That's by design. Do not try to force it, or do not think that you broke something and try to bend it back. That's how it should look. Okay. Now we're going to take our spring, the trigger housing spring, and if it looks like letter S, what you need to do, well, actually the easiest way to explain it is when you need to reinsert it, you reinsert it into the trigger housing this way, you'll find there's a special spot for the spring to go into. You simply lower it just like that, and then once it's in there and seated correctly, you'll see it come through the little opening in the back. I hope you can see that right there. Okay? Now you can take your trigger bar with the trigger on it. Remember that it needs to go in this way. So we're going to take that and put the other end of the spring in over the trigger bar and force it into that opening in the trigger bar right there. Okay? Then we're going to turn everything and align it correctly, pull on the spring a little bit, and force it to go into the trigger housing. Then you're going to turn the trigger bar this way as you're inserting it into the trigger housing, and move that side of it into the little slot of the trigger housing on this side. You see that? How it just went in there? And then we can leave it just like that. This whole assembly is now completely reassembled. Now we're going to put it back into the frame. What we need to do is make sure that our trigger goes into the proper place, and then we need to make sure that our housing, especially on Gen 4s, because it's a little thinner, let's make sure that you're focused on the right part, right here. Okay, so our trigger housing will need to go into its place in the frame. Sorry, I can't see what I'm doing because I'm doing it for the camera. Just like that. Okay. And then you simply push this down. You'll hear a click. Sometimes you don't hear a click, but usually you hear a click. And this will mean that it's properly reinserted. The other way you're going to know that it's properly reinserted is that you'll be able to see all the way through this pinhole. Make sure that your trigger went through as well, and that you can see through its pinhole here. Now we're going to start reinserting the pins. We're going to use the plastic pin that's all the same diameter all the way. We're going to put it in first, allow it to go all the way through. Make sure you're focused on that. And what I usually do is just rest my tool sideways on it and then push it all the way in this way until my tool touches the frame. And usually this will mean that it's the same on both sides. There, as you can see probably. I hope you saw that. What I was doing is just using the tool and pushing on it sideways until the tool touched the frame. And usually this will make sure that it's centered in the frame. So now your trigger housing is secure. We're going to start reassembling this part. We're going to take our locking lug or locking block or whatever it's called. And you can see how I'm positioning it and how I'm putting it in. You're going to slide it in all the way, and you can see how the holes just aligned. Now we're going to take our metal thin pin. We're going to put it into the top pinhole. And also what I do is I use my tool and I lay it down sideways. And for this pin, because it's not as long as the frame is wide, you just need to eyeball it and make sure that it's even on both sides when you put it in. Alright? Now that you've done that, we're going to reinsert the slide release. And the slide release will go in between the trigger right here and the frame. So if you're looking at it this way, it's going to go on the left side, obviously. And even though it's not very much aligned, you can see it kind of protruding a little bit. Because of how this pin is made, the pin with 2 grooves. And by the way, you need to start inserting it on this side, because you don't want to pass, if you start inserting it on this side, the first groove will lock on the slide release, and then you're going to have to work it and try to put the pin through further. Now if you start on this side, you're only going to have to deal with 1 groove. So it's going to go in very easily, and you'll actually hear it kind of click when the slide release seats into the groove. At that point, if it's seated properly, and you can check this very easily, if you try to push on the pin, it shouldn't want to move out of the frame. See how it doesn't want to go? That's how I know that the slide release is sitting inside that groove. It holds that pin in. Alright? The only thing left now is to, and on the frame I mean, is to reinsert the slide lock. And remember how I said that the side with the lip is going to go towards the back of the frame? This is the position, the proper position for it. So I'm going to actually start it on this side, just because I think it's going to be more convenient for me. And then here's that little spring that needs to be under it. So I'm going to push it down and start moving my slide lock over it. Okay? When you center it, there's a little cutout on the bottom of the slide lock that the spring will kind of ride up into, and that will prevent the slide lock from moving out of the frame either way. Okay? So you can check it just like what I was doing just now. You can check it by trying to push the slide lock out. If it's seated properly and it's riding that spring, it's not going to want to come out. What we need to do is make sure that there's tension on it. There, snaps back. Everything seems to be done correctly. So at this point we're going to lay the frame aside and start working on the slide. Here's our slide. Let's make sure we're in focus. Okay. What we're going to start this reassembly of the slide with is the, let's see. Oh, wow. I'm just trying to focus you in on the striker safety. So I'm going to reinsert the spring. Usually I just rotate a little bit, just trying to make the spring kind of catch and stay in the striker safety. Otherwise you just need to make sure that when you're reinserting it, if your spring didn't get kind of caught by the safety, you need to make sure that the spring is not laying kind of perpendicular to the safety, because when you press it down, you're going to ruin the spring. So you see, hopefully, that when I depress it, you see a narrower part of the safety come into view. That's how it needs to be depressed when you're reinserting your extractor. Your extractor, obviously that's the claw side. The other side has a little round kind of knob on it. That knob is going to go into that opening right there. the claw is obviously going to go towards the breech. That's how you put it in. When it falls in like that and you're holding the striker safety in place, press down when you're putting the extractor back in. At this point I can release it. And now the extractor is kind of held in place. What I can do now is take the extractor plunger, which you can see right here, and we're going to put it in the metal side first, spring towards the outside of the slide. Alright, just like that. It's not going to go in all the way. That's exactly how it should be. Next, we're going to take our striker sleeve, which is this thing right here. And by the way, there is a striker, there's a second part of the sleeve deep inside the slide. So if you happen to accidentally remove it, don't flip out, don't be worried. You can just reinsert it back into the slide and kind of push it in as far as it'll go. And that's the other half. There's another half that sits deep inside the slide. So we're going to take our striker. Let's make sure everything's in focus. It seems to be. We're going to put it into the sleeve like so, so that the striker lug right here, wow, did I do it off camera? Here, you take your sleeve and you put the striker in like so, so that the striker lug rides into the sleeve but doesn't come out. You see that? It doesn't come all the way through. Now we're going to put the spring back over the striker and rest it on the sleeve. We're going to take our 2 half retainers, and what I'm going to do right now is put the striker inside its sleeve on the surface, on the hard surface or whatever surface you want. I'm going to keep the spring pressed down. I'm going to move the striker out slightly, and then where are those 2 little pesky things, and then I'm going to take these little retainer halves, and hopefully you can see that they have a thinner part and a thicker part. The thinner part goes into the spring. We should be in focus so you can see. So there, I just put it inside the spring. My striker just slid down, sorry. Wow, keep doing the exact same problem. Here. Okay, 1 half in. And then the other half goes on the other side, same manner, inside the spring, and then you release the spring so that it captures it. Those little halves capture it, just like so. Okay? Now we can take our striker assembly and put it into this large opening. There will be a little resistance as the spring goes through, that's fine. Check that you have some tension on the sleeve. Everything's been reassembled correctly so far. Then what we're going to do is, let's see if I can show you this in focus. Yeah. We're going to sit the slide up this way. I'm going to position my cover plate like so. I'm going to use my Glock tool, lay it flat, that's the easiest, and depress the sleeve as I'm pushing on the cover plate slightly, so very slightly, you don't have to force it. The sleeve is now retained. The only thing that's still in the way of the cover plate is the extractor plunger. So I'm going to push it in and continue moving the cover plate forward. And now both are captured. The only thing remaining is to move it all the way in until you hear a click. Like that. That means the sleeve went into the cover plate and locked it. Okay, so now it's not going to slide off easily until we depress it. Depress that sleeve right here on the bottom. Okay. What do we have left? Let's see. What's missing? The barrel. Let's put it in. So we're going to start the barrel muzzle first, put it into the slide, and then just allow it to drop, and we're going to slide it back until it drops even further, and it's going to be in line with the slide. Then we'll take a recoil spring and put it first into the slide here on the front side, and then we're going to take our back, push it, and just rest it against the barrel right here, and it should be in the center. Don't try to put it all the way down, it'll only go in one way basically, and that's what you should see. And that little space you see is the space that the slide lock is going to sit in between the barrel and the recoil spring or the recoil guide rod. Okay? The only thing left now is to put the slide over the frame, and you'll only be able to do it this way. Make sure before putting the slide in that your recoiled guide rod is sitting properly against the barrel, and then continue moving the slide back, and then move it back all the way, and you will have completely reassembled your Glock. At this point you can check it. Your trigger works. Let's check the reset. That works. Let's check the slide stop. That works. Firearm seems to work. Let's make sure that we can take it apart. Move the slide lock down. Yep, that works too. Again, let's make sure that that is seated properly before reinserting. Alright. And the magazine disassembly is just like any other firearm, so I decided to skip it.